Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to today's webinar, which is going to be on understanding domain security and how best to protect your portfolio. My name is Prudence Malinki. I am a Client Services Manager, or CSM, at MarkMonitor. Thank you so much for your time today, and today's session should be really interesting. We're going to go over security and portfolio consolidation. So we're not just going to look at consolidating your domains and why. We're going to look at what type of security risks are involved about misaligned portfolios and having that unique perspective. In addition to that, we're going to look at the threats to your portfolio and the different levels of threat to your portfolio. We're also going to be having a look at what actions you can take to make your portfolio secure, but also we're going to explain a little bit more about what actions we take here at MarkMonitor to make sure that your domains are secure that you may not know about. And also at the end there'll be a Q&A session, but please do feel free to ask any questions as we go, and I'll answer them for you at the end. And again, this session is supposed to be interactive, so do ask questions as you deem fit. So before we have a look at what risks uncentralized or misaligned portfolios pose, let's have a look at the typical reasons, not all, but the main reasons as to why we find that portfolios are not centralized or not consolidated. So we're looking at things such as old registration policies. This is stuff such as historic preferences of provider or old ways of going around doing things that don't go with the actual current ways that you do things now. And that can sometimes mean that you have split portfolios between an old preferred provider and your current preferred provider. And again, that can be quite difficult to reconcile. In addition to that, you have regional office or department action. Now, that's a fancy word for departments gone rogue. So this is where your marketing team has decided to go rogue because of a campaign 3 years ago, and they've registered 3 domain names with a generic provider or like a commercial provider. That's not your standard provider. So this is what's meant by that, and that's a very common reason for misaligned portfolios. We're also looking at things such as historic or legacy domains, and this was domains that were registered a very long time ago, and sometimes these domains are unknown domains that basically have been registered with these third parties a very long time ago, and I hate to say it, somewhat forgotten about. They've just been renewing and renewing with these other providers and just waiting to be found and brought home. And then the final one, complex transfer requirements. So this is where you can find that there are required documents in order to complete the transfer, or there's any additional information that those documents need to be legalized or signed by a notary public, or a case of the documents need to be executed in a certain way and it just wasn't possible to do it at that time. And that can sometimes be a reason why you have a split portfolio between multiple providers, just a complex transfer requirement. However, for whatever reason you find yourself with misaligned portfolios that aren't centralized, there are a number of risks that you find happen as a result of misaligned portfolio. So when you have portfolios that aren't centralized, you are exposing yourself to renewal risks, because not all providers automatically renew domain names. So sometimes you can actually find that you accidentally allow domains to lapse because you don't realize that they're with this provider that's based in China, or another random provider that you don't use. Another one is different providers provide different pricing structures. So the more providers that you have, the more varied pricing frequency, pricing structure, pricing requirements that you're dealing with. So this could be very confusing, and also can lead to a decreased management efficiency, which is our next point. The more different entities that you're working with, the more difficult it becomes to work in an efficient and fast way, because you're having to access multiple portals, you're having to access multiple points of contact in businesses, or make multiple phone calls to speak to the people that you need to speak to. Now, the next point, which is compromised portfolio security. Not all providers have the same emphasis on security. Also, not all providers have the same experience in dealing with these kind of matters. If you're working with a commercial registrar, their focus or their primary aim isn't to make your domains secure, it's to provide you with cheap, fast domains. So if you're worried about the security of these cheap, fast domains that you've got, they're not necessarily going to be able to help you because they don't have the experience. And also, leading to the next point, they have a limited security offering. So what this means is that they don't have the service to give you, even if you want that service with them, because it's not their primary thing and it's not how they operate. They're not working with corporate entities. It's just meant for, Joe on the street who's got one domain, rather than a large corporate registrar with thousands of domains. So the limited security offering in conjunction with the compromised portfolio security, and that can also mean your actual portal. So different providers have different levels of portal access and different levels of security associated with their portal. So sometimes you can find that not all providers will have an actual portal that have an actual additional layer of security, such as two-factor authentication, which I'll discuss a bit later. But again, this is another risk that you expose yourself to by using multiple different providers. And also the limited security offering, again, as I've mentioned, when you look at it holistically, it shows a varied security approach. And again, that's a very real issue that you will face when you use multiple providers. So once you've actually managed to identify and then migrate and ensure that you've put your portfolio with one provider and you've centralized your portfolio, this is a really good opportunity for you to have a look and actually do a review of your domain strategy. By some of you may not be aware of what I'm referring to when I say domain strategy. So when I say domain strategy, I mean have a look at your registration policy. Who is allowed to register? What are the typical brands that you can register? What is the internal approval process for your registrations? Do they have to be approved by management? Do they go through your marketing team? Do legal have to have an opportunity to peruse the registrations beforehand? Is there a document? Is it an email? These are the types of really good opportunities for you to have a look. And if you don't have a registration process or policy, it's time to create a registration process and policy and have that communicated to the wider business to ensure that everyone is standardized and acting in a uniform manner. We need to avoid having rogue departments registering domain names with random providers because they're excited in the heat of the moment. When you create a really strong and robust policy, you make sure that there's less hassle for you in the long run as a business and that you're able to efficiently manage everything and all of your property. Now, with regards to registration, it's the same with deletion. This is a really good opportunity when you have all of your eggs in one basket to have a look and see which domain names you want to keep and which domain names you no longer require. Now, at MarkMonitor, we have numerous tools that can help you actually choose which domain names you want and which ones you may not want. And also things such as traffic statistics. If you put domains on our DNS, we can give you information that will allow you to view the amount of traffic that goes through. So you can start looking at domains and making efficient decisions as to what you want to keep and what you want to delete. Now, the next point is configuration. When you have portfolios, it's so imperative that you actually use them to the biggest extent that they have and you maximize the benefit of them. When essentially you are paying for them, so they're not free, so you should actually make sure you make a return on your investment. And this involves making sure that every domain that you own points somewhere, even if it's just a redirection to your primary site, because every single domain name has the potential to generate traffic, and every traffic is a potential customer, and every customer is potential revenue. So you need to maximize your revenue by ensuring that every single domain name points somewhere. So when you have looked at your domains and which ones you want to keep, make sure that configuration is really high up on your list of priorities as to what you keep and what you no longer need. And also, it's another opportunity for you, after you've done your consolidation, to look at portfolio access and review. Now, this is something that all of you that have attended many of our events at MarkMonitor, be them the domain events that we hold annually or our symposiums, we are always talking about domain security. It's so important to us here. And portfolio access and review is a really crucial part of your domain security. Who has access to your portfolio? What level of access do they have to your portfolio? Is that right? Has anyone left your organization? It's little things like this that need to be periodically reviewed to make sure that you're not inadvertently compromising the security of your portfolio. One of the main threats that you actually have as a corporate domain portfolio holder is that of internal threats. Not necessarily the external. It's not necessarily Mr. Cyber Squatter who lives in faraway land. It can actually be someone internally that's disgruntled that just wants to make one small change, or someone that doesn't have the right level of access that goes in and accidentally makes a periodic change to the DNS and accidentally pulls down a website. So it's these levels of security that need to be reviewed to make sure that you're not creating a potential issue with regards to your security or compromising the safety of your portfolio. Now, when you do these types of consolidations and intense reviews, because obviously this takes a lot of effort, but the long-term benefits are great, you'll also notice sometimes, not always, but you may have missing domains that you presumed were always in your portfolio that may not actually be there. So this is a really good opportunity after you've done your consolidation to actually start looking into the acquisition of domains or the acquisition of your property that you thought that was yours that actually, for whatever reason, may not have been registered or may have been deleted accidentally, and actually reacquiring those missing domains. Now, if you ever find yourself in that position, you should always reach out to your CSM who can provide further assistance to help you with this. Or if you do have your own internal team, the legal teams tend to be very good at these things. Do make sure that you do your own acquisition work if you can. And again, you can actually acquire domains that should have been in your portfolio that may not be as well. Okay, so in addition to policy and procedures and also making sure that you're reviewing the users and the level of access, this is a really good opportunity once you've finished your consolidation to actually start looking at the portal, but then also to actually implement some further internal security practices. So this is where you're actually using some of the stuff you'll learn today. So it's little things such as portal training. At MarkMonitor, we offer free of charge internal training, and we do it in a multiple level of ways. We'll come on site and we'll train your technical team to be as technically proficient as they need to be. We can do this by webinar, where we can actually demonstrate in real time online for global teams and offices how to navigate the portfolio in an efficient way. Because sometimes all it takes is an accidental click of a button to make a catastrophic error. And so by utilising this free training, you'll be making sure that when you navigate through the system, you're doing it in the most secure, safe and efficient way. Also as well, is again reviewing your portal users and access levels. And this is focusing more on the technical users side. So who are your tech teams? Do they have access? Do they have the right level of access? Is there two-factor set up? Do they have the right level of two-factor? So what is two-factor, I hear you ask? So at MarkMonitor, our portal uses an additional layer of security called two-factor authentication. This is by Symantec. It's essentially a system or scheme whereby codes are generated using a multitude of ways, and you cannot access the portal without adding a specific randomly generated code from the application. And once that's successfully applied, then you can access the system. So sometimes you need to change what level of security you have, or actually making sure that you have the right type of two-factor implemented. Some people have SMS. It is available in some countries, but some people prefer to use the app because they find that more convenient. And it's a good time for you to review what level you have and which one works for you. Now, this last point is one that will probably be used quite a lot during our session today. So it's the periodical review. It's so important for you to constantly go over and check and double check. Now, what is a really good opportunity for you to do this is during your service review with your CSM. This is a really good time for you to have a look at who has access, who has the right level of access, and to go through those changes. We can work with you to make this type of action a lot less painless and a lot more seamless than is possible. So do work with your CSMs to actually have this implemented against your portfolio. You don't have to do it alone. So we've talked about the types of actions after consolidation and why you need to consolidate. Let's have a look at the actual threats to your portfolio and the types of things that we do here at MarkMonitor that you may not know about, but also the types of things that your portfolio is exposed to that you may not know about. So let's have a look at the types of, or the different levels of threats that you have to your portfolio. So I've touched on this before. We have two, or what I like to categorize as two types of threat. Your internal threat. Now this is you, your employees, your employers, your ex-employees, or regional offices, satellite offices, affiliates, subsidiaries, and associated companies. So anything that's associated with you is internal. However, anything that's not directly associated with you, this is any unaffiliated, unauthorized, third party, that is an external threat, and it comes in so many different ways. It can come from an email that's coming from a random person, or an email that's spoofing to look like it's you. That is still an external threat that you will have to deal with. And as a portfolio holder, as a corporate portfolio holder, you are exposed to internal and external threats all of the time. And our job here at MarkMonitor is to help protect you against both of these types of threats. And today what I want to do is to show you some of the things that you can start doing now to prevent the types of actions that these threats can actually result in. And these are things such as registrations that are unauthorized or unapproved, or unauthorized DNS updates, so changing name servers, or even adding records to zone files to slightly change how a domain name functions. This can also mean unauthorized transfers inside or outside of your portal or portfolio, and any other unauthorized modification. And these can come from a multitude of reasons as well. It can be political, it can be disgruntled employees, but either way, there are certain things that you can do to make sure that you are protecting yourself or doing your utmost to secure your portfolio. And we'll discuss these in a bit more detail today. So let's have a look at the different types of threats that you will actually tend to see. So we have the internal unauthorized access. So when we say internal unauthorized access, this is where someone has had access to the portal that should not have had access to the portal. So this can sometimes be a person who was part of the domain team that has left, but now still has access to the portal, and this can be because we have not been notified that they've left and that we need to remove them, or that we haven't updated, or their account hasn't been closed for whatever reason. Now, when you have internal unauthorized access, this is just as much a security breach or a security threat as the external, because if they have the DNS access and they're able to access are hosted services or your zone files with your existing provider if they're not MarkMonitor, they can still make technical changes to your domain names and compromise the content and security and essentially the flow of your business and the function of your business. So it's really important to treat your internal users and internal security processes as much as you look at your external. So it's really good that you focus on internal too. And this is where, and I said I'd mention it again, periodical review of your portal users is really crucial. Who have access? What level of access? Is this correct? And check this on a frequent basis. And it's so easy to do. All you need to do is reach out to your CSM and ask, and we can happily provide that information to you. And then you can just literally email and confirm who needs to be removed, who needs to be added, and who needs to be updated or upgraded as well. So that's an internal threat. Let's look at the external threat. So we have things such as phishing, and I've mentioned about spoofing and, malicious attacks. So this is the type of thing that you sometimes hear about where there's an email that's been sent, and this email in and of itself has been approved or clicked on by someone in the organisation, and account information has been provided and then used by this third party to access the portal. So these are the types of things or the types of threats that you can actually see from a phishing or from an email kind of perspective. Also as well, you can deal with things such as unauthorized access by third parties without email. So this is things such as people who have portals or service providers that have portals that don't have added layers of security, and those portals become accessed by third parties. I hate to use the word hacking, but yes, like a hacking of a portal to access your portfolio and then make changes. This is another version. However, these last two orbs or notes are ones that are also threats to your portfolio, but ones that you may not be as familiar or as conversant with. So just as your portfolio with ourselves through our portal can be compromised, you can actually find that there are compromised situations or security breaches at higher levels. So you actually have compromised registries, and I'll explain a little bit more about the 3 R's, the registry, registrar, and registrant level. I'll explain a bit more about that shortly. But also, you have compromised hosting providers as well, so DNS service providers that find their security compromised as well. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about these two in a little bit more detail for you as well. But part of the thing that we like to pride ourselves here at MarkMonitor is that we have such robust processes and policies in place to help deal with these last two scenarios, which sometimes as portfolio holders are out of your hands and things that you can't necessarily protect yourself against. But what can you protect yourself against, I hear you ask? So here on this slide you can see the types of things that you can start implementing today which will really minimise the internal threat and some of the external threat actions. And here I say it again, it's that periodical review of your portal users and the levels of access. I will keep saying this. I'll keep saying this during our webinar today. So essentially, who has access to your portal? Is it the right level of access? Has someone left? Has someone joined that needs to have access? Who needs training? Does everyone know how to access the system? Does everyone who needs to place a registration know how to? Do you need to have a refresher session so you're more comfortable, more confident? We like to make our clients feel confident using the portal, and that's why we offer these free sessions of training. So use them. They're there for you. Also as well, I'm going to touch on this now because it's really quite important. For domain names that are critical, business critical to you, or just very important domains for you, it's time for you to start looking at an additional couple of layers of security for these specific domain names. And by that, I mean advanced security services. Now, some of you may already be utilising that. If so, congratulations, I'm impressed by your security skills. However, if not, it's really important that as a business you start looking into this because it's actually really quite key. So there are two different layers of security services. So we here at MarkMonitor, we call it SMVD locking. Now SMVD stands for Super Most Valuable Domain locking, and essentially what this means is you create a protocol, and this protocol is a specific set of instructions that need to be complied with in order to allow access to the domain to make any type of modification. So the domain becomes locked until a specific series of either passwords, passcodes, or actions are undertaken and in a specific way that's already prescribed in order to make sure that that domain name can be unlocked and accessed. So this can be as spy-like as a code word and a phone call by specific people. So you call, you identify yourself, you then say a series of code words, and then that will then trigger the unlocking of the domain name for you. Or it can be something of whatever choosing that you have. You can devise your own protocol, essentially. But essentially what that means is that if you try and go into a portal or our portal and change the domain, you can't. If you try and go into the portal and do a DNS change, you can't. If you try and do any modification to the domain in the portal by standard practice, you can't, not until you've utilised this protocol. And this makes a really useful layer of security, so you know that you can't have anyone doing anything in the portal to your domain anyway. So even if someone does have unauthorised access, it won't lead to catastrophic events because of this SMVD locking. Now, in addition to SMVD locking, you can actually lock a domain at a registry level. So that's one level above us. You can go directly to the registry record and lock it with them. And you can actually use an SMVD protocol in conjunction to the registry locking. So this is like a super high locking level where you actually blocked it at the registry and you've put a protocol in place. So for your super most valuable domains, or for your domains that have the biggest traffic going through them, or the most value to your business, or they're just business critical, having a registry lock and an SMVD lock in conjunction to each other is really one of the most smart things that you can do for your portfolio. So in addition to locking your domains and my favourite thing to say, periodical review, always make sure that you have secure portal access. So here at MarkMonitor, we mandatorily make sure that every portal user has to have two-factor authentication, otherwise they can't access the portal. Does your existing provider do that? If not, you need to start looking into ways to either make sure you have a provider that does, or to start implementing something such as two-factor authentication, or come to a provider that provides you with that secure level of portal access. Another really, really handy security tip and security measure that you can do is restricting by IP address range. So what this means is that if your business and your local office has a specific set of IP addresses that it utilises, which most do, you can actually use those as the actual range of IPs that can only be used to access the portal. What does that mean? That means that if anyone tries to access the portal using different IP addresses than any in the specified range, you can't access the portal. But what does that mean in reality? It means that Joe cannot access the portal from home, he cannot access the portal from the coffee store, and he also cannot access the portal from across the road. He has to be within a specific set of IP addresses. And sometimes we find that this is a really handy way to make sure that you can only use the portal in the office or during a specific region or specific area. And again, it's another layer of security that should help you minimize the threat of internal security breaches. Now, the last one is one of my personal ones that I think is actually really quite key. And it's to do with, again, my favourite, that periodical review of portal users. So our portal at MarkMonitor, we actually have internal audit trails. That is a fancy term for every time you log into the portal, everything that you do, everything that you change, everything you modify is tracked and a transparent audit trail is listed. This last point of not sharing or distributing portal account information, this means that you should always make sure that you do not share your portal username and password with someone else, because what that will mean is that you expose yourself to liability for other people's actions, because that means that if Joe is in the portal as you and he decides that he's going to delete some zone files or he's going to have a bit of a party and register lots of different fun extensions that are automated, then it looks like you've done that, and as far as we're aware, we can't prove that it wasn't you that's done that. So it's always good to make sure that you retain your own portal information and you do not share this information. It's also quite important as well for the purposes of security and to make sure that you can audit the actions of your fellow employees, is that you do not create accounts that are generic in nature. Make sure that every account is named and that that person is an actual person that needs to have access to the portal and is affiliated with your business for obvious reasons. Okay, so we've had a look quite extensively at the internal threats that you can actually look at, but there are external threats, and we've touched on some of them today. We talked a bit about phishing and a bit about spoofing and things like that. But what I want to mention here is about the type of external threat that's actually happening on a higher level that sometimes is outside of your control. And this is where having a really good registrar actually really makes a difference. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is the external threat of where a registry becomes compromised or an agent becomes compromised. So at MarkMonitor, those of you who are our clients will always hear us during our events mentioning the 3 R's because we're quite proud of our training services that we do here. So for those of you who are not existing MarkMonitor clients, let me explain about the 3 R's. So with domain services, we have 3 levels or 3 elements to providing domain services for you. We have the registrar, the first R, that's us here at MarkMonitor. We have you, the registrant or the client, you're the second R, but the most important one. And then you have the third R, the registry. So let me give you a practical example of how the 3 R's interact with each other. You, the first R, the registrant, will come to us, MarkMonitor, the registrar, and ask us to register a domain name for you. We, the registrar, will then go to a registry who is the extension holder, who runs the extension that you want, such as Nominet for the UK, AFNIC for France, or DEBIC for Germany. And we will go to them, hello, can you register and secure this domain name on behalf of our client? And we will use the tools provided by that registry to secure that domain name through that registry on your behalf, making sure that the whois shows your details and that you're the legal owner and all of this good things. So when we've secured this domain name for you, it sits in our portal and accessible for you. So all of the threats that we've described have been threats where people have come to us or to your portfolio through us. However, sometimes you find that unauthorized threats and security can happen through the registry themselves. And this is where a third party will then go directly to a registry, and then the registry security becomes compromised and your domain name is then under threat. So these are things such as unauthorized DNS updates that happen through a registry, so name server changes that are unauthorized. And like with internal, there were so many different motivations and reasons why these things happen. It can actually even be political too. But to be fair, it's here where the actual relationship between the registrar and the registry comes into play. You, as a registrant, there's not very much that you can do apart from ensure that you've done the utmost to keep your domain secure by implementing security practices. But in situations where registries become compromised, this is where the registrar really stands out completely. So this slide is just to explain a little bit more about what we do here at MarkMonitor to protect our clients and you from these security breaches, and the types of actions that we are able to provide in order to deal with these breaches in the most efficient and effective and safe way for you. So at MarkMonitor, one of our unique positions is that we actually have extensive, very good relationships with global registries and hosting providers. So when and if these things happen, or if there's any type of threat, we're actually at the front line working alongside the registry to help remedy and rectify and fix the situation. And because we have a collaborative approach, we tend to find that things are remedied in a much more efficient manner. We're not hands-off, we're quite hands-on, and we kind of work and liaise directly with points of contact to help deal with the security breaches when they happen at that registry level. And it's taken us a long time to develop these relationships, but we actually do have them here at MarkMonitor. In addition to that, for significant compromised registry scenarios, we're actually able to devise notification methods to keep you, the registrant or our clients, abreast of all of the latest developments and the extent of what's happened. And also, as well, it's the same with hosting providers as well, because it's not just registries that find themselves with security breaches. Sometimes hosting providers find themselves in predicaments too, and we take a transparent approach with both, making sure that you are kept notified with significant breaches so that you're fully aware of what's happened and the extent of what's happened as well, and what actions we've taken. So in addition to us having these relationships and working on these relationships, we also do extensive education on security strategy. What this means, and for those of you who are already our clients, you'll know this already, we have domain events which happen once a year. We also have the symposium. During these sessions, it's not just a networking opportunity with great lunch. It's also a really great education piece. We strive to take the time to make sure that you're all kept up to date with the best security practices and protocols and processes and the easiest way to implement them. In addition to that, we do love to provide training, and we like to work collaboratively and strategically with you to make sure that you're able to implement these actions against the wider business. So we will educate, we'll help you, we'll do these things such as webinars to make sure you're kept up to date with the best types of actions that you can do, but we'll take it to that next level and we'll make sure that we can help you implement them in your business, or what that means, how can you do that? We'll try and work with you to help you find ways to essentially make it work. So let's have a look at the best practices, and this is basically a recap of some of the things that I really do believe and strongly suggest that we start looking into and that you can start doing today to start minimizing the threat of both internal and external security breaches against your portfolio. Okay, so Make sure that you lock domain names at registry level where applicable. So just to make you aware, not all registries have registry lock available right now, but for those that do, MarkMonitor do provide registry lock services. So do reach out to your CSM and ask more information about how you can get this organised. But for your most valuable domains, if you are not locking them now, I would strongly suggest that this is something that you look into, because the security threat is real and it does happen, and it does happen on all of the levels that have been highlighted to you today, and it happens to you more often than we care to admit. But part of the reason that we're such a good provider is the fact that we deal with these as efficiently and as seamlessly as possible. So it's a case of us making everything look much smoother than what it is. But again, these threats are real, and these are things that you do need to take into account. So the next point, never ever share your login credentials for domain or DNS management portals. So if you do have your username and password and Billy's forgotten his username, tell Billy to call his account manager. Or if he's nervous and shy, tell him to send an email, because it's quite important that you don't let him use your own details, because anything he does could reflect on you, and you never quite know who's going to be doing what. Because if he accidentally pulls a website, then that could be something that looks like it's on you. So do make sure that you keep your account details safe. Also as well, disable the ability to edit core domains for all users. So if, again, it comes down to that periodical review that I'm consistently saying during our session today, do make sure that if someone doesn't need technical access, that they don't have technical access. Simple. It's very simple. So if you, when you're reviewing, have a look at the levels of access that these people have. If you're not supposed to be doing registrations and you've got registration access, this is something you need to look into and say, I don't need to have this registration access. I think I want it switched off. So again, making sure that everyone has the correct level of access, especially when it comes to things such as core domains, then that's fine. However, you can bypass this need to disable the ability to edit your core domains if you use something such as SMVD protocols, whereby no one can edit your core domains anyway. Just saying. Okay, so another thing, and I'll say it again, is to continually manage and review your secondary user accounts. So who has access, what level of access, is it right, is it correct, who needs to be added, who needs to be removed. And also, I'm going to add this in here, it's not necessarily relating to security, but it's just as important. When you have a primary user and your primary user is leaving, it is very important, in fact, it's almost crucial that you provide us with notification in advance. So whoever is your primary user on the account and they're leaving the organisation, let us know, because we'll need to appoint a new primary user, preferably before the existing primary user leaves. We're very process-driven over here at MarkMonitor, and we're very security-focused. So if someone tries to update a primary user, and they're not authorised on the account and they're not the primary user, then sometimes it can become quite complicated in order to change the details. So avoid all of the unnecessary pain and hassle. Just let us know in advance, and then we can work with you to do a seamless handover. Okay, so let's come back to our actual best practices. Also as well, implement IP address restrictions. Again, IP access restrictions are really, really useful. So if you know your IP address range, it can be implemented literally in seconds. It's so straightforward to do. And once it's there and it's in place, it doesn't go anywhere, and it's perfectly fine. And it's free. It doesn't cost a penny. So you should actually really consider doing it. And again, making sure that you review all of your users and the levels of access that they have. So whoever's on the portal, should they be there? Is it the right level of access? Should they be going? If you know someone's leaving, let us know at the earliest opportunity. However, if for whatever reason you need to add someone, do let us know. For those of you who aren't existing MarkMonitor clients, we are only able to action requests by authorised users. So if anyone tries to contact ourselves to make any requests for changes and they are not listed on the account as an authorised user, then we're not able to action any request from them. And that can even mean senior management can't send an email because they're not listed on the account. So when you're doing this periodical review of portal users, don't just think, who needs to go? Also think, who needs to be added? Is there sometimes a potential request that could come through from Steve from accounts? Then make sure that he's listed against the account so when he does contact us, we're not having to have the awkward conversation of saying, sorry Steve, you're not an authorised user. We can't access or action your request. So these are the types of best practices to make sure that you are maximising the security and buffering your security, but also you're going to be minimising the threat as to your actual domain security. Now, in addition, this isn't quite listed on here, but it is a valuable point. The education piece works two ways. So we provide education from our side to you, but it's also really good that you provide education internally to your team and that you communicate your security practices to the wider business. It's so important to ensure that everybody in the organisation understands your security practices and everyone's on the same page. It's all about standardised actions and making sure that everyone's acting in a uniform manner. So you don't have rogue teams and you don't have individuals that have great ideas that can lead to catastrophic security events. And to be fair, it happens from registrar to registry to registrant level. All it takes is for someone who hasn't been educated about phishing emails to accidentally click on a link that looks like it's legit and then to literally compromise the portfolio and actually have a hacker come in. And that happens as well more often than we care to admit. But the education piece does work two ways. So it's making sure that you educate internally and then you come to us for a little bit more education as well. But yeah, so those are the best practices to ensure that your portfolio is healthy and happy and secure and safe. And that brings us to the end of our session today and just time for us to go through some Q&As and some questions that we have on the line. So thanks everyone for sending some questions through. Let's have a look at some of the questions that come through. I'm actually quite surprised. We have quite a few, which is quite good. Okay, so the first one is, will the slides be available following the presentation? Yep, we definitely will make sure that there'll be an online version of this presentation that you should be able to access, and we'll send something to you following today's session. So don't worry, yes, you can have a copy of the slides. Oh, we've got quite a comprehensive question here. So let's have a look. So it says, we have a policy in question that we register CCT domains for in our company name and countries we do a certain amount of business in. I know each company has its own policies, but is this a standard method of protecting our brand in domain names? That is a very good question. Okay, so a global or CCTLD registration policy, this can vary from business to business. So what I would suggest is working strategically with your CSM to devise a really robust policy. But from my experience as an account manager, these are the types of things you need to look at. Even though you may not trade in certain CCTLDs, CCTLDs have categories, and they're categorized according to how easy it is to register them and the levels of traffic that go through them. So even though you may not trade in certain countries, those countries may actually be very valuable extensions because they're very easy to register, very popular with cyber squatters, and also they do generate traffic. So sometimes, even though you currently are doing the right thing, you're registering in the countries that you trade in and the countries that you do business in, you do have gaps in your portfolio because there's certain geographical regions that even though you don't trade in, they either generate a lot of traffic or they actually have very low registration requirements, so are high risk for competitors or cyber squatters to register. Oh, I used this dreaded C word. To register. So sometimes you need to secure these domain names in conjunction to the strategic countries that you trade in. So this is another thing for you to think about. But I could talk about domain strategy all day. It's one of my favourite things to kind of work with my clients about. But yes, so you have to kind of look holistically. So you have to take a step away from just where you trade, and you have to start looking at which are the extensions that you know that you may be trading in the future. So you have to look 5 years ahead. You know, are we going into China? Are we going to go into here? Also, you need to look at which are the high-risk extensions, and your CSM at MarkMonitor can help you with that. But also as well, you need to start looking at variants of your domains, phonetical misspellings of your domains as well. So you're just making sure that you cover most of your bases. And also, with your existing ones, you always need to look at, if we don't have it, are we okay with someone else potentially registering it? And that's another thing to think about as well. But yes, so even though, yes, you're right, companies do all have their own policies, there are still some additional extensions that you really should incorporate into your portfolio to make sure that your portfolio is as extensive and as strong as possible. We do provide services here where we can score your portfolio, so you can actually see the areas of weakness in your portfolio right now, and also you can start looking at where you need to be, you know, or what your portfolio needs in order to be as kind of robust and as broad as it needs to be. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions as well, which is great. Okay, so another question that's coming from John Mitchell. Hello, John. Where can I find a how-to training for the MarkMonitor portal to better understand its elements? John, you're in a unique position where at this moment in time we don't provide an actual booklet or a how-to guide. I find personally, in my experience as CSM, training people face-to-face or interacting with people online and showing them how to use the portal in real time is a far more efficient way for them to learn how to use the system. In fact, the newest way that the training happens now, which is it's just a new trend that's happening, is for those of you that have dual monitors, you snazzy people like me, you have one screen, which is you logged into the portal, and in real time you have another screen, which is me doing the webinar. So what happens is I'm showing you how to navigate through the system, and then you are also doing it at the same time, which I just think is really great because you're actually getting that practical exposure while simultaneously I'm still showing you the most efficient and effective ways to navigate the system, because sometimes people develop very strange habits when they go into the portal, and we need to kind of move away from that at the moment, move away from strange behaviours in the system. Can we get a voice recording of the session as well, please, Widom? I believe we should be able to. So this webinar has been completely recorded, so you'll hear my dulcet tones in conjunction to the slides. And yes, we'll provide a link for you as well, so you can have that too. Okay, oh, John, that's not a problem. So what we can do is reach out to your CSM. If you don't know who your CSM is, John, send an email to customer.service@markmonitor.com, and we'll be able to reach out for you and organise a portal training session. And again, it's free of charge, and again, it's just a really handy way. We can customise it towards your needs. So if you're a technical user and you need technical training, we can really focus on hosted services, how to edit zone files, how to add a zone, how to remove a zone, so you will be technically proficient. However, if your day-to-day use is more registrations, we can go in there and we'll just focus on portfolio management, how to register a domain name, how to navigate through your portfolio, how to export the portfolio in an Excel format as well, and how to create reports as well, as we can do that for you as well. Oh, Rhythm's got another query. As many other organisations, we have 5 primary domains and about 100 domains to secure our product. Okay, is there more? Okay. No, I don't think there's any more there. Okay. Okay, Rhythm, if you want to add the question there, that would be great. Okay. So I think that's all of the questions. Here we are. John's got another one. Is it difficult or costly to transfer my scattered domains with other registrars to MarkMonitor? Actually, you know, it's not as complicated as you think. And this is another unique, specific thing to MarkMonitor. The UK team alone in MarkMonitor, or the EMEA team in MarkMonitor alone, has over, collaboratively, if you put our years of experience together, has over 4 decades of experience. Genuinely, I've got over 10 years. We've literally, between our teams, we have such a strong team of very experienced CSMs who are seasoned. So when it comes to difficult in transferring, we come up with really comprehensive transfer plans, and we discuss this with you from the outset. So there's always going to be a discussion. You'll know how much it's going to cost because we'll provide you with an actual pricing estimate so you can see how much the transfers will cost you. And if you need to then look at cleansing that portfolio, i.e. updating all of the registrant details so it's all standardized and clean, then obviously we can provide you with the pricing of that. So we do that all up front in a transparent way so you can see how much it's going to cost. And then if the project has, say, 300, 400 domains, we will provide you with a comprehensive actual guide as to how we're going to go about doing the project, and then we'll have periodical reviews. So this can be bi-monthly, weekly calls via webinars where we show you the progress, the hindrances, and we can all discuss together what the outstanding requirements are. So again, it can be difficult and it can be costly with some providers, but with MarkMonitor, because we're so experienced in this, it's actually relatively straightforward. And again, we try and keep things as transparent as possible. So where there are going to be areas of concern or difficulty, we'll let you know, and we'll say exactly what we think that difficulty will be, and we'll give you advanced warning. We're very preemptive here. We like to prevent things from going wrong. So do lean on us if you do have portfolios that you're wanting to migrate in and things of that nature. Okay, so Rhythm, I understand. I've got the second part of the question now. So you have 5 primary domains and about 100 domains to secure our products. What is the most cost-effective way to manage them? Well, firstly, what I'd say is with one provider. That's the first thing I would suggest. Make sure that you have them with one provider. And the reason why that will be more cost-effective in the long run is it's less time, which means less man hours, which means less money that the business is having to pay for people having to use multiple systems. Also as well, it's going to be standardized pricing because everything's set to one set of pricing and it's one portal, so everything's going to be much more efficient for you to actually manage. So getting them centralized, I think, will be key. Now, another way, the most cost-effective way, periodical reviews of your portfolio. So this is where you look at your portfolio, see which domain names are no longer generating traffic. So if you have a domain on our name servers, we can give you a glimpse as to levels of foot traffic going through, so you can have an indication as to which ones are actually doing something for you and which ones aren't. Another thing that would be really cost efficient for you, maximize what the revenue that you generate from your portfolio. Have a look at your portfolio. If you have generic 3-letter domains that don't relate to any of your specific brands, such as, for example, gfb.com or ign.net, these have intrinsic value and you actually can resell them. So you have to start thinking of your domains as valuable assets. You can resell them. 3-letter generic domain names will actually have 6 bigger values. You can actually sell them for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So sometimes you are inadvertently sitting on a gold mine and you're worrying about, oh, how do I save costs, when you're actually sitting on a portfolio that's actually worth quite a lot. And if you're not actually using the domain, of course, think about selling it. We do have teams that deal specifically with acquisitions and domain sales and valuations of domains. So if you've looked at your portfolio and you're like, this one can go, then, definitely consider having a valuation. But before you do that, another really important thing that I forgot to mention, make sure that the wider business is consulted and all of the primary stakeholders of your business are consistently consulted when any type of major decision is made with regards to your portfolio. So don't delete any domain names or don't submit any deletions until all of the relevant stakeholders in the business are aware and also agree to what you're doing, because you may inadvertently be that rogue marketing team that I joked about earlier. So don't be the rogue team. Make sure that you work collaboratively, just like we work collaboratively, to make sure that all of your actions are working with the values of the business. You don't want to work against the business in what you're doing. Okay, so let's have a look at... Oh, thank you, John. John's just said brilliant webinar, thank you. Thank you, John, that means a lot. Okay, so Tony Sutton sent a question. How successful are you at buying back domains through the TMCH? Is this an expensive process? That's a very interesting and strange question. Okay, so for those who aren't aware, the TMCH is the Trademark Clearinghouse. It's basically the mechanism that you use to register domain names during a Sunrise launch. And when I say domain names, you can only register the brand new GTLDs during this very small time window called a Sunrise phase using the TMCH. So this is a very interesting question, Tony. So buying back domains through the TMCH isn't quite how the TMCH works. So the TMCH has two primary actions: registering domain names through Sunrise and then notifying you when people have registered domain names that correspond to your trademark during Sunrise. So if what you're referring to is organising for infringement actions against domain names that have been registered that are identical to your domain name, we have a brand team, and our brand team work with regards to infringements. Also, we do have an acquisitions team, but there are two different approaches. So the brand team will work with your IP to send out cease and desists or notifications of infringing domains, whilst the other converse side, we have an acquisitions team based in Boise. They are fantastic. And basically, they will work to anonymously acquire domain names, which means that they won't use your IP, they will not use your name, but they will just register domain or just acquire domain names on your behalf or make inquiries on your behalf for domain names that you may want to buy. But you'll be essentially buying them. So if it is your IP, then obviously it's not advisable that you buy your own intellectual property. You should use your trademarks to kind of do that. How successful are we at buying back domains through the TMCH? It's kind of hard to answer that question because I'm not entirely clear as to what mode you're referring to or what type of route that you're referring to. With regards to acquisitions, we do have a good success rate, but acquisitions, like with anything, you can't force someone to sell their own property if they're using it within their own right, but you can make them an offer they can't refuse. So to minimise the likelihood of rejection, if you make them a very sizable offer that reflects the market values and your genuine interest in the domain name, then yes, you know, obviously they're not really going to say no. But sometimes if they are using it for business, the domain doesn't have a value, and it doesn't matter what you offer the domain, it's too valuable to them as a business, and they're not going to sell. And we can't force a sale through an acquisition because we're not using intellectual property. We're not saying that what they've done is wrong because they haven't done anything wrong. Whilst on the other side, it's a case of we notify them of the infringement, and then if further action is required, then you may need to look into UDRP services. And again, that's a kind of a lengthy, and that can be quite a different route. And we don't do those directly here at MarkMonitor. You'd have to go through one of our providers. Okay, so is there any other questions that you'd like for me today? If you do, I'll leave it for one more minute. But if you do have any more questions, feel free to ask. You have one opportunity to ask me anything that's popped up. And I'll leave it for one more minute. So if there was anything that I've said today that didn't necessarily make sense, or if there's anything that's got you intrigued a little. Okay, so I think I understand what Tony is saying. So, Tony, in these circumstances where there is a brand that is very similar to your brand, there are a number of factors that you need to take into account before you can officially call it an infringement, and before we can start sending out angry letters saying you're infringing on our client's IP. So you have to look at what they are doing with that brand. Is the brand genuinely the same colour, using the same logo, using similar images as your brand? If so, yeah, great, that's passing off. Okay, we understand, that's fine. However, if it's not, and if they're not offering a similar service to you, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. You really have to look at the use of the actual domain name and what they're trying to do. If they're trying to cause confusion with internet users by making them think that they're associated with you in some way or something of that nature, then that becomes a bit more infringement. However, if they're autonomously using the domain and it's not really related, it just happens to be, as it looks a bit phonetically similar, then it's not so clear-cut, and you may need to start looking into acquisitions or things of that nature. But it needs to be a clear-cut case of infringement. There are sometimes areas where, even though you believe in your brand and your brand is strong, not all businesses are genuinely out to get you. Sometimes it's just a name that sounds good, and it does just happen to sound a bit like your name. There's a famous saying that goes, "There are no new ideas, there's no original ideas." So, if something does sound similar, you do have to look at what they are trying to do, what their actions are, what that website's being used for. Also, you can work with us and we can do reverse who is lookups. What a reverse who is lookup is where we can take an email address or registrant name or something of that nature, and we can try and find additional domain names in their portfolio using who is lookups. So that way we can try and identify if this person or this company that exists has registered a portfolio of domain names that look like yours, and then that's definite kind of evidence that you can use to kind of show that there's obviously a bit of a problem and that this company aren't who they say they are, and they're acting innocent but obviously doing something very different, and they're being a bit sinister. I hope that helps a little bit. Okay. Oh, thank you, Martin. Much appreciated. Okay, great. So, I'm going to give one more minute for any further questions. I'm very aware, thank you everyone for staying on the line. I'm very aware that we've kind of really run over today. But yes, if you have any further questions, I'll give it one more minute. But again, this is a really good opportunity. If you have any further questions, to kind of let me know. Okay, but before I close down our session today, there is one thing that I do really want to end on. And with security, I know that it can seem like a really daunting and challenging task, and having to look at the wider business and communicate strategies out. But what I would really strongly suggest is that you work collaboratively with us here at MarkMonitor and allow us to try and take some of the pain away from implementing these policies, and use our knowledge. We have extensive knowledge in these matters. Ask us, what should we be doing? How is this not working? What would you suggest? And let us make suggestions. You have And those of you who have CSMs, you literally are working alongside a very experienced person that has a whole load of knowledge that they're willing to impart and share with you. So, take a collaborative approach and don't feel like you're working alone or that you're working in silo, because you have all of MarkMonitor's services and all of MarkMonitor at your arsenal. So use us. We're actually quite a useful tool. Don't feel like you have to start this and this is going to be really difficult and challenging. Just reach out to your CSM. You can literally just send an email and say, I've just had a really good webinar. We talked about security. She mentioned this, this, and this. How do I do that? And go from there. And it's literally just something as small as an email that can lead to something as having a secure and safe portfolio, and that's all we strive for here at MarkMonitor. And if you do want to know more about our education pieces, I would strongly recommend that you reach out. And also as well, if you can, do make sure that you attend our events, because they're not just socials, they're really good education tools. And these are for all of our global events as well. We really do try and make sure that we utilise that time to educate all of our clients and all of our potential future clients as to the best actions to keep their portfolios safe and secure. Okay, I'm just going to have one last check for any more questions. No? Okay, well in that case, I'd love to conclude our session today. Thank you so much for your time. And again, I've been Prudence Malinki. My details will be on this slide here. I'm a CSM or a Client Services Manager at MarkMonitor. Do feel free to reach out to me personally if you do have any additional queries. My email address is on this slide here. My telephone number is also there. But again, thank you so much for your time today. And if you do need any further information, either reach out to me or reach out to your CSM, or you can email customer.service@markmonitor.com. Thanks, guys.